episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And our guest said it all right here. Boom. Runkle of the Bailey, big YouTuber, and we're going to introduce him in just a moment, as well as Brandy Churchwell, who's a big podcaster, and Rob D'Amico. I will formally introduce them in a moment's time, but of course, no court today in the Karen Read trial. It was day 22 of testimony yesterday. And it's about all we could ask for was one consecutive day of court before they had a break yet again. But they will allegedly be back Wednesday through Friday for full days the next 3 days. And we are going to have live stream analysis on this channel all day with a guest TBD. Of course, John O'Keefe, Officer John O'Keefe, really is at the center of all this, even though his name is forgotten, sadly, all too often. He is the fallen Boston police officer discovered in Canton, Massachusetts on the evening of January 29th, 2022. Some say it was his girlfriend, Karen Read, that backed into him and killed him. And others say, no way, Jose. They say it is a frame job by members of law enforcement who were with him that night. And we've got three experts, as I mentioned, here to break it all down. Ian Runkle from the YouTube. He hosts a legal information and education YouTube channel called Runkle of the Bailey. Ian, I should know what this all means, but I don't. Explain the Runkle of the Bailey reference to me.
So there's a BBC series and book series featuring a criminal defense lawyer, which is Runkle of the Bailey. And so I decided to play off that a bit, especially because a judge once misheard my name as Runkle and then never forgave me for not actually being Runkle. So I kind of was like, okay, that's got to be the channel name. And it might be a bit too obscure as a reference for a channel name, but it is what it is. You know what?
It's different, and I love it. So we've got Runkle the Bailey here. He makes it known he is a Canadian, but let that not fool you, because he will comment on American cases, as he's about to do tonight, and he will focus on the law as well. And I got to say, Canada, one of my favorite places. I was just in Toronto on the book tour with Carm, and we had a massive turnout, so even more reason to like the Great White North. Meanwhile, Brandy Churchwell, she's been a friend. We were at the Charlie Adelson trial together. She is the creator and the host of 13th Juror live stream and podcast. Her second season of the podcast was called Conspiracy in Canton, and it takes a deep dive into the case against Karen Read and how the conspiracy formed and has been in the top charts the podcast has in the U.S. for true crime. So kudos to Brandy Churchwell. And last but not least, they keep yelling at me, how come you don't have a prosecutor type on? Well, you're getting a retired FBI agent here, and we know that the feds are looking into this. It is Sierra One Consulting's Robert D'Amico. He is a Jersey native, lives in Florida like myself now, and he's also former military, and he, like a lot of people, has been harsh on the Commonwealth, but now we've got to rewind it and take it back in light of what we saw yesterday on the witness stand. Before we get there, I was kind of scouring, the internets, and I did see a quote from a guy named Sean Hickey, who's a good friend of John O'Keefe. He was actually interviewed by People magazine, and his quote as of yesterday was, "A circus has ensued. People are screaming free Karen Read at his parents who are senior citizens. It's a disgrace. Everyone has forgotten that a person lost his life. Never mind the good person that he was." Brandy, I know you never forget about the victims. Has John O'Keefe been lost in the fray here? Has he kind of just become the invisible man that he should not be?
Unfortunately, I think that it has happened a lot. And I know that it's hard not to address some of the circus as it's coming. It's, if a circus master walks by, you're going to have to acknowledge it. So I know that some of the craziness that has surrounded this trial has taken, center stage at some, at multiple times. But I have loved and thrived on those few moments during the trial that we've got to hear from his friends and family and hear some of the sweet stories about him and some of, some insight into who he was as a person and his character, because he sounds, amazing.
Yeah, he does sound like a great guy. And every time an officer falls, it is rough on everyone. Runkle the Bailey, he's an awesome Canadian. Calla Lily tells me, how could I be so foolish? The Panthers are playing the Oilers. Are you a diehard hockey fan, Ian, being that you are from the Great White North and you guys learned to skate before you learned how to walk there?
Believe it or not, I don't really do any sports, anything. So I was vaguely aware that something happened with the Oilers because people were cheering on the flight back from CrimeCon. And I was like, that probably means we won because we're flying into Edmonton and people are cheering. But
well, you're actually down. I hate to break it to you, 2-0 to the Florida Panthers. And I'm not really a huge hockey fan, but D'Amico, I mean, it's Florida gets crazy over their hockey. That's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, they've actually had some good teams with the Tampa Bay, and now the Panthers doing well. But I think it's all the Northeast folks who've moved down here.
Yeah, I think that is what it is. So enough about hockey. We digress sometimes on here. Ian, Karen Reed was asked by a reporter leaving the courthouse yesterday, was it hard hearing those messages, those text messages that were being read by Michael Proctor? And her response was, I'd like the state police to say something about the language they've heard. What do you think as far as this goes? Will there be a wider spread investigation? Does the entire Massachusetts State Police need to be looked at now because of apparently one real bad apple here?
I wish I could say that they're going to, clear things up, but I suspect after this trial, things will just continue as they are. And unfortunately, I suspect that while there's a lot of really good officers out there, there's also bad apples in every department, and you never really know. And this, I think, is really concerning to people because if you're imagining sort of the young woman who's getting arrested late at night for impaired driving, she should be able to expect that the person putting handcuffs on her and putting her in the back of a police car in the middle of nowhere is not somebody who views women like this and is not somebody who talks like this with his buddies. People should expect that if their property or their phones or their computers are being searched, that's going to be done in a respectful fashion, especially because sometimes they search people's property and people turn out to be completely innocent. They should expect that if there's nudes on their on their phone, that those are not being sought out or shared. And as much as the officer denied it, I think that conversation really suggests that they were ready to share anything they found. That was my read on it. And this should be of concern. This is the sort of thing that I think police departments need to take more seriously, but I don't see that changes are likely.
Yeah, I want to comment on this comment here from KDH. Was anyone else feeling hot about Trooper Proctor repeatedly using the word retarded? I have an intellectually disabled uncle and find that term so offensive and inappropriate. I know someone with a mentally retarded sibling, and I know that it is such, for them, such an inflammatory term, a really ignorant term. And, we've been talking about the other words that Trooper Proctor has used, like the C word, but I just want to say it is a horrible word to just toss around because these are people, just like you and I, and have emotions, and family members have emotions. So another despicable word being used by Trooper Proctor. Rob D'Amico, you're retired law enforcement. Does it bother you when you hear the way Trooper Proctor spoke on the stand? Because in a sense, gives the entire law enforcement community a black eye. People think that this is how you all act, how you all speak, what you all do when you're texting each other. Your reaction?
So I have two opinions. One, coming from that, and I have to say, when I was young, and I say immature, probably would have done some of the same things. And police have a dark sense of humor in order to see what we see. Same thing with the guys in the military, the horrors that we see over there. We get very, very dark sense of humors. I talk about the pirate case and some of the things that happened in this crime scene of horror, that the FBI agents that were there, we have black humor to joke about it because what we're seeing is bad, and it's the way you deal with it. On two of these, one, he's not a young trooper. He's not a guy just out of the academy, and it shows extremely poor judgment that he did it on text, and he did it with his supervisors on there, which I think speaks to some other things going on. I just remember in FBI, like the phones that you're using and you're texting back and forth, and how they come down on you in the bureau for doing anything along these lines is just incredible. Again, it more protect the shield type of thing, but just in general, professionalism and everything else. I got very mature going over to Iraq and Afghanistan and dealing with folks, and the military guys had a different attitude, but I always told them, like, look, you have to deal with everybody like you want to be dealt with yourself. It goes back to, if I want to get intelligence out of someone, if I want sources and stuff, if I treat people like a human, I've had people I arrested come back 2 years later and give me intel saying, oh, I remember you treated me like a man when we dealt with them. But also, like, if a police officer grabbed my phone, what would I really want him to look at, or any of my kids' phones? And if each police officer puts himself in that position, I think you're going to see a turnaround, but they have to be mature enough to understand that. Like, hey, look, this could be your family member. It could be your phone. You could be in this spot. What would you want to do should guide every action you do. But again, that's after 26 years. I wish I could say I did that at 1 or 2 years in. And again, the Bureau folks hire like a little bit older, but he wasn't a new trooper. He wasn't right out of the academy. And the judgment is just unbelievably poor, and it is going to transfer to the jury, no doubt about it. You can't get away. He can say as much as he can, like it didn't affect how I was dealing with the investigation. It absolutely did. Yeah, and they're going to get that.
And we're going to circle back and kind of dive into that, the effect on the jury. Cindy Collins here saying that Adam Lally, the 88, turned this trial into a circus. I don't know that he's the only one. Brandy, how do you react to that? I mean, there's other people you could certainly point the finger at, but any which way you slice it, this thing has totally spun out of control, I believe, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of openings that were made that allowed the circus in. Like, you know, one of the things that I've been so vocal about is the investigation and the lack of investigation and the mistakes that were made, the unprofessionalism. You know, having Proctor, I know he said on the stand that he did not know Brian Albert, but there's an obvious connection between his family and the Alberts. There are other state police that could have taken over. There's just so many things that could have been done to prevent some of the circus that has ensued. And even some of the things like if they had, I know that they went right inside the house, but if they had just said, hey, can I look around? Because think about if she did hit him with a car and they had said, let me take a look around. And Brian Albert already said when he was on the stand, he said, oh, of course they're welcome in my home. So if they had just looked around, that could shut down that whole, basement theory. If that's not a real thing, shut it down, rule it out. There's so many different opportunities that they had to rule out different scenarios and different problems. And because it wasn't done properly, I feel like that has allowed all of this speculation to come in, and it has been part of what has created this circus.
Yeah, and Brandy, just to piggyback on that, you and I were talking privately, but this is one case, especially as a creator, and I'll have Ian weigh in on this as well. You just see how angry people can become and really vicious on social media. How's it been for you to cover this with the deep-seated passion, I think, on both sides here?
I have never had my character called into question as much as I have since doing this trial. And it wasn't as bad in the beginning. I started covering this trial last summer, and it wasn't as bad in the beginning, but over the months that it has progressed and gotten, more and more toxic. And I get it from both sides, for different reasons. Like the things that I say that go directly, it's just my opinions. I talk about things that I see and questions that I have, but things that I say that go against the defense, I get, hate for that. But the majority of the hate that I get is, things that I say that are the holes that I see in the Commonwealth theory, or the issues that I see with, the investigation or with the witnesses. So I kind of get it from both sides, but I've never seen it to an extent where people are so hardcore you have to choose one entire theory or one entire theory over here, and you are not allowed to have questions in between. And if you do, then you and your dog and everybody in your family are horrible people. I've never seen it like that before.
Runkle, your take, how's it been for you? You seem like a lovable guy. You live in Canada. You don't follow ice hockey. You do date night with a wife. No one can possibly be coming after you.
This has actually been one of the most contentious trials. Like covering Johnny Depp, there'd be people who were upset and I tend to be the guy, I like to sort of call him where I see him, in the sense of there's moments where I'm like, this is where they did a good job, or or even things where I'm like, this is a place where I think that the judge, like yesterday, she really chewed out Jackson, but I read that as that she was chewing out Jackson because she was basically saying, shut up and let me give you what you need. She was basically telling him, like, stop the sideshow, you're gonna win, so let's just get to you winning here. But people get really angry, and I've had people email me, I've had and people have really sort of decided on something. And where things will get really awkward is if Lally suddenly improves his case, there's going to be a lot of people angry, if I start commenting and saying, oh, this evidence is really bad. And that's not going to stop me, but it's still interesting to see just how much sort of the battle lines are drawn and how personal people are getting about it, because some of the commentary about me and about other people has been like deeply personal in ways that I'm like, oh, that's a thing, I guess. So a lot of emotion on this one.
Yeah, no, there is. And, I think all creators who do this are, we all want to be loved. No one wants to be hated. But with this particular story, there's plenty of venom coming our way. And, sometimes it's difficult when you put yourself out there. I'm not whining and I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you, with this particular case, that happens to, it's kind of like almost like a lose here. No matter which way you go, it's coming back at you. Speaking of the evidence, to get you in more trouble now, Ian, since your first time on the show, I mean, where do you sit right now? Has the Commonwealth done anything on their end to make you think that Karen Read is in fact responsible for this?
Where I kind of sit is that we will never actually get to know. And that is a really tragic thing for John O'Keefe's family. The people who should be most upset with the quality of this investigation are the people, like, if you think Karen Read is guilty, you should be super angry at these officers that you've seen on the stand who have tried to hide connections between each other, who have, done all of these things. Quite frankly, if I'm a police officer and I see that there's this big investigation, I might be like, you guys have to look into my place. Have a look in my basement, have a look everywhere, like come, shine the luminol around, just to eliminate that as part of a good investigation. You saw, and these aren't things I would advise a client to do, but from the perspective of a police officer, it's the same thing as them providing their DNA samples. The Proctor's comments, which he calls, regrettable and unprofessional, he's basically unintentionally sabotaging the investigation. And you couldn't if I was trying to sabotage an investigation you couldn't do a better job than what they've been doing here. So I think that's really, really unfortunate. If Karen Read is convicted, there's going to be outcry from people saying, release Karen Read, appeals, free Karen Read. If she's acquitted, there's going to be tons of people who will never feel that justice is done. So ultimately, because the investigation is so poor, no one's going to be happy. And this will probably be something that people are still fighting about on Twitter, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, no, I bet you there. And that's when the documentary comes out and the Ben Affleck and Matt Damon film come out. Hope 8 Fear here, gifting 5 Surviving the Survivor memberships. Jimmy McNutty, he's always in the house. I'm going to read a text that's going to get a lot of people irritated, but it's my job, bring you both sides. Jimmy McNutty here, 38,000 texts between Proctor and his oldest trusted buddies, and 0.1%. I don't know if that's an actual figure. Jimmy, you can let me know. About Karen Read shows the level of obsession Proctor has about Karen. Obviously here, Rob, Jimmy McNutty is minimizing this. And I read some interesting, stuff online today, which we'll get to, which are interesting comments. But what do you make of this? That 0.1% is pretty gnarly, pretty nasty. Does it wash away, the other 99%, if in fact it is these 38,000 texts, which is what what Adam Lally did cite in court yesterday. 38,000.
It doesn't matter what percentage of all his texts are. They're horrible. And again, if you really want justice for the case, and people involved in the case, you recuse yourself, because again, it's going to come out. And if you really want justice served, you come out with all these things, and you don't text stupidly about, I don't know what cop doesn't understand how your texts aren't going to be brought up into discovery. It's just unbelievable of what they did. And when you talk about the investigation being so bad, if they really want to do justice for their cop friend, you don't collect blood in Dixie cups and red Solo cups. I'll get hit on that one. And that's the thing. Other people on here with the comments, we're here to go back and forth to talk about what's being presented and how to do it. And you talked about the judge and what you thought of it, and then someone puts an opinion to it that you're saying something, and the whole idea of discussion back and forth nowadays. I remember growing up as a kid and my parents talking politics and crime things, and they didn't agree with everyone. They discussed it verbally back and forth, and they still liked each other at the end, and they respected each other's opinions. But that's gone, and I think that's gone in a lot of things. And being able to do it on a keyboard without confronting someone is part of it. But the cops have to understand that all this comes out. Have they never been to trial before? Have they never? It almost seems like they've never done a case where texts back and forth about people haven't come out. Did they not think that was going to happen? And they're just jeopardizing their own credibility, their own case. If they really wanted justice for John O'Keefe, you say, hey, look, I can't do this. I know too many people involved. Even though he was on call, it needs to be turned over to someone else as soon as you start finding those things that are in there.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Steve Cohen, who books our guests, and people are thrilled. First of all, Mike Dorado, Runkle is my spirit animal. So happy he's on, followed by Analytical Blarney AB. Thanks for having the Law Tubers on, Joel. Love Alita and Runkle. Alita was on last night with Legal Bites, and I think we need to get more Canadian civility in this country of ours. I don't know what happened, but we have dropped the ball. I work down at the World Trade Center, 3 World Financial on 9/11, and Rob D'Amico remembers this well. I mean, after 9/11, this country came together like you've never seen before. People had American flags. Now we are very divided over seemingly everything. So we need to get back to some of those. It was the most awful tragedy ever, but at least we were able to come. There was some good that came of it. So this is Ian. these are Michael Proctor's words here on the witness stand yesterday, and I apologize. The COE, we're having a hurricane.
Are we about to get demonetized?
Oh, yeah.
We're having hurricane-like storms here, so the COE is trapped in the Keys. Otherwise, I'd have sound for you all, but and I'm sure she's upset to be stuck in such an awful place. But this is what Michael Proctor said about these texts on the stand, Ian, and I quote: "These juvenile, unprofessional comments have zero impact on the facts and the evidence and the integrity of this investigation." Is he just pouring salt in the wound, or is he making a valid argument there?
I thought it was pretty galling of him to trot out the word integrity at that point. I just went, "Oh, you went there, did you?" And I bet the jury did too, because I mean, they show a lack of integrity in how they were doing things. And he's trying to say, "Oh, the facts are the facts." But the problem is that a lot of these things come down to the personal credibility of the officers, including officers who were directly involved in these text chains. And I'll sort of address the thing about like the volume of it compared to his total text. I've had cases blown by a single word said by an officer. There was a case where over the radio, which was of course recorded, one officer says, "Did you get the guy?" And the other officer says, "I got a guy," and they have a chuckle. And that was enough to get the prosecutor, when they heard that, to throw the case, because they went, "Nope, not running this." Your words matter, and unprofessional juvenile comments do impugn the integrity of the force, as well as you personally and the investigation. And this is one that is coming down so heavily on the integrity of it. It's not a case where they've got, like a knife with the DNA of both the accused and the victim, where you're like, okay, we've got a really good bit of evidence here. This is one that comes down a lot to, was this investigation conducted properly? And now, how can you have faith in that when you see who's doing it and how they're treating it?
Well said. By the way, John Sawicki, I met him finally at CrimeCon. If you haven't been to CrimeCon, you have to try to go. Denver 2025. John Sawicki is retired law enforcement, originally from Portland, but lives in Tampa. And he is an attorney, and he's also a digital forensics expert. So he runs the gamut. And we were talking about bringing him on here to discuss the searches, the 2:27, I believe, a.m. searches. So John is a friend, and we're glad to finally meet him. Jennifer D here with the super chat, and we'll send Brandy's way. Michael Proctor, he hated her so much that it's more probable that not that he planted and falsified evidence to ensure her conviction. So this is the issue, Brandy. Now people who are maybe on the fence, and I'll be honest, I'm one of them. When I first heard this whole frame job, I was like, no way. And I've said this last night, unless you were in that home that night, you don't know what went on there. But I do know that they are trying to hide something, because all these butt dials, the throwing out of the SIM card. But what about this point that, if you're kind of sitting on the fence and now you've got this disgusting, vulgar language that Proctor is using, makes you wonder, was he up to something more, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like, and you and I talked about this a little bit, it feels almost like with the witnesses and the way that a lot of them don't come across as honest or likable, or, there's been some issues with, like you said, like the butt dials and things like that. And then you have these texts that you're hearing from Proctor. When these things come up in your mind, your easiest option is, well, she hit him, and now she's, going to have to face the trial, and we'll hear all the evidence, and she'll go away, and, and that'll be that. Because that's, Occam's razor, right? That's the easiest thing. But then when you start having all of these different things that are like, okay, well, why is all this happening? Why is all this happening? It kind of makes you question it, but you're thinking, well, it could be something that's not related. And then you have the lead investigator who's, throwing things out here. Like, you're hearing the vulgar way that he's speaking about her, and you can, you're hearing the tasteless things that he said, and the way that he's speaking. And so it almost, anybody who doesn't have that doubt. And I even had people messaging me like, that was the first time that I thought, okay, maybe this is actually possible, because when you're hearing that level of nastiness from the lead investigator, it does seem like something could be possible. And that doesn't even mean that he's, that all of a sudden means that John O'Keefe was actually killed in the basement and now he's planning taillight. But what that can mean is that he's got some shady stuff going on, trying to beef up the case to, ensure conviction or something like that. So the problem is, because things were done so poorly, there's so many answers that we can't get to know exactly why these things are shady.
Yeah. And I mean, just coupling that with the fact that, and I think Ian said this at the beginning, I don't know that we're ever going to get justice for John O'Keefe here because of this. And that's, the biggest shame in all this. Abby Crossing, who I also met at CrimeCon and now consider a good friend. Rob D'Amico, this is your world. The text would not have come out unless the FBI got involved. Before we get to your answer, Jen DeSimio here. So excited to see Runkle on one of my favorite shows. Steve Cohen always says a rising tide lifts all ships. I love having other YouTubers on, and hope to have many more, and have Runkle and Brandy and everyone else back on, as well as Alita. She told me to remember her name. Alita, not a gallon, she said. Rob D'Amico, what part is the FBI playing in this right now, and what part might they play in the future with what appears to be a problemed Massachusetts State Police Department?
Is that thunder down by you?
Yeah, I could hear that.
That's my end.
Oh, is it? Wow, that sounded haunting. But go ahead.
We got the thunderstorm out here. I don't like. Again, I think the text would have come out anyhow. I think the defense is good enough to have subpoenaed those and try to request them. It might have helped that if the Bureau got involved. I think it's going to be interesting. I think if there was any, I think if they had hard evidence, either way, you would see that. You're going to see that if it comes out. So it could still be in there. Again, we're talking about the specific point in the trial and stuff. The Bureau is not going to hide anything from either side, but it could be that we get surprised that one side brings something out that the Bureau got. But it's going to be tough to. Again, I think I could actually believe a cop did the right investigation and still spoke like that. Like, I don't think that alone says that he had. I think it's bad judgment, and then that bad judgment's backed up by how bad the investigation was. When they talk about like all the missteps, like, okay, one thing, two things. I thought the same thing when you invited me to do the first one, and I started reading about the case. I'm like, oh, get out of here! Like, yeah, that's what happened. And then all of a sudden, the more and more goes there, and then the investigation is so bad that if she actually did do it, they just lent all these gaps. And I go back to some things like how you collect evidence. You have to think about the trial. You as you're doing it, you think, how is this going to look? And I talk about this pirate case, and when I did in Somalia to show that a person was giving me luggage voluntarily, I took a picture with them because I didn't even know how to speak the language, and I wanted to convey to the jury, knowing it's going to get in front of the jury. So how can I do this so that they get the image of this wasn't me taking it and everything else? So when they're doing these, like, how do you not think about how is this going to look at trial? Like, just the evidence collection and everything we've seen in this, it's so crazy that, and now I'm starting to believe, okay, what did they do in that basement? It is the most improbable thing that I think of when I think of the case. But there's so many holes in it. And then you go back to, I don't think his language alone in these texts say, oh, that's proof. I think it's proof of bad judgment, and the bad judgment goes into the horrible operation of the entire investigation, and then the witnesses lying about things is what starts cluing me in. What are they hiding? I don't know what they're hiding. I really don't. I don't know if it's in fact what the defense is saying, but I know they're hiding something, because you don't have that many lies and that many butt dials in a night without something being covered up. I don't know exactly what it is personally. Again, at this point, Eric, to everyone, I can't convict her on what's been given and what's happened. It's one of those things, like we talk about the roller coaster of having, as much as the defense has great causes, as it makes the uphill battle of a conviction harder. It's just getting to the point that, and I got hit on for saying I was a Yankees fan and how the Yankees came out bottom of the ninth, but again, like you're expecting now like an 8-run ninth inning for the prosecution to get over all these major issues that have come up.
By the way, one of the good things about living in Miami, Rob, is I got $25 Marlins tickets, and I was front row behind home plate the other day, laughing at my kids who were upper deck at the same game. It's a long story. But Angela here, whose last name I'm not going to try to pronounce, even though my mother is Serbian, so Djordjevic or something like that. Anyway, my mother could pronounce this flawlessly. I'm a scientist and watching this trial from the scientist POV. By the way, I want to get STS Nation involved. Put your questions in the triple Q caps. I'll scoot down to the end of the chat, and I will get your questions to our esteemed panel. Anyway, Angela here, Ian says she is not guilty. It's just physically impossible to happen. What is the Commonwealth alleging? Do you completely buy that? One of the issues I have here, there are all these very affirmative statements being made by people that aren't necessarily true. Before you get to that answer, you should all be listening to the Canton Select Board. That's like the town commission meeting. It's happening right now. The town is furious at the police and their track record. I guess that is the place to voice their opinion. But what about her comment just now that it is absolutely physically impossible scientifically impossible for Karen Reed to have committed this crime?
Part of the problem is I don't actually know what the Commonwealth's theory is right yet. Like, we don't know how they're saying this accident happened. And we are 22, we're coming up to 23 days into this trial. And it was like day 16 that they actually led evidence that John O'Keefe was dead. That, to me, in a murder trial is unreal. I've never seen that before, where it takes 16 days to have any evidence that he's actually died. But I don't know if they're saying, like, are they going with she was drunk and hit him? Are they going with, like, are they saying she hit him fast? Are they saying she, like, crushed him up against the lamppost? Are they saying that, are they saying he was crouching down, standing up? I can't actually do any sort of physics assessment, like, does this make sense from previous cases I've worked, just because I don't know what their theory is. It's bizarre. It just seems to be like they say, oh, she was angry at him, although that seems to have gone away. She drops him off at a party, he's dead, therefore must be her, because she made some statements that everybody disagrees on and everybody who saw them is super suspicious. And I'm going, this is your case? I have prosecutor friends who don't really watch my channel because they hear enough of me elsewhere, but who have been sort of paying attention to this trial, and they reach out to me going, are you looking at this Karen Reed stuff? Because why is this going to trial? And when, like, local prosecutors watching this don't know why this is going to trial, it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's at the very least, the experts I've talked to believe it's overcharged. I'm just wondering, in talking to so many people, I mean, the closest thing to the kind of the divisiveness of this case in the States was O.J. Simpson. I think it was back in '94. Anything in Canadian legal recent history that compares in any way?
We had a trial of a guy named Gerald Stanley. He was accused of a shooting of a young Indigenous kid who, depending on sort of which thing you listen to, was either lost and seeking help with a damaged vehicle or else was on the property stealing things. And the argument from the defense was basically that it was a hang fire, so that the gun, like, was malfunctioning when it went off. And that was fairly controversial. There was a lot of lot of arguments over that, especially because that one gets into sort of racial issues. I think part of the problem with Canada, we get less attention on our trials because we don't televise them. But when they're reported, they can be even more contentious because of that, because how they're reported can really sway what's actually, it can be quite off from what's actually in the trial. So if you remember Johnny Depp, there was a difference of opinion that sprung up between people who were avidly watching it and people who were watching like trial commentary on it.
Yeah.
Similar to that.
Tell Canada to get its act together. It's tough to be a YouTuber if you don't stream your trials. But in all seriousness, I think you need, as a former broadcast media guy, I think you need the transparency. People need it's a public court. You should be able to watch it. That's my opinion. Others, Phil Waters, we have on every Friday, says no one needs to see it but the jurors. So there are differing opinions. Sunshine Cheryl here to Brandy. Social media gets involved, and it's a good thing, as the truth may never be told, including this case. Remember the Murdoch case? It was the podcasters that brought that more light on that case. I don't want to be self-righteous here, but Brandy, do you think that we are helping or we're part of the problem, or both?
Both. I think that there are definitely situations where it's like sourcing things out to, everybody who's got all their eyes on it can help. I actually, when I did my chart, there was a couple things I found that ended up getting entered into evidence against Alex Murdaugh. So which is just a random thing that me at home on medical leave had, all this time on my hands and something to do. And so that was a random thing that wouldn't have happened otherwise. But then you have situations where you do get, people from the YouTube world, entertainment world, whatever, that are contributing in a negative way too. And I think about, even having the, and not just in this case, we've seen it in others too, having the harassing, of witnesses and victims' families, and, spreading misinformation. And, we've seen it in other cases too. And I think that some of that, because then so much of the focus becomes on having to debunk or calm these fires down, that it takes away from, the actual focus being on some of what's important in the case.
Yeah. Ian, since you're a YouTuber, you want to take a stance on that? Are we helping or hurting the cause here?
Both. And I mean, the thing is you try to be as respectful as you can, although not everyone does. There's different degrees to which people sort of handle things respectfully. There's some people who are actively trying to put their hands on the proceedings, and that's something I won't do and I don't think is helpful. But I mean, at the end of the day, you've got John O'Keefe's family who wants to see justice done, and I'm sure they don't appreciate every time the camera zooms in to see their grief. I don't like that.
I hate that.
I've commented that, we're sort of stuck with the pool feeds we've got. And I don't like when they zoom in on, you saw it in the Taking Care of Maya trial, where they're, the lawyer's talking to the judge and it's right in on Maya's face and you can count her pores. That I think is not helpful. And it's sort of, it can get into sort of grief porn and that kind of thing. And I don't think that's useful. But one of the things is that whatever happens, this trial is going to be very contentious. It's going to, and I think it is really helpful for people to be able to watch this and get an impression of what happened here. And I hope at the end of the day, this is probably a futile hope, but I hope at the end of the day that people can watch it and say, okay, at least there was a fair trial. And we don't always get there. There's lots of people are already attacking that sort of preemptively, but that's the best we can do. Sunlight is, I think, the best disinfectant. And we can see that as well with the Young Thug trial, where right now the judge is engaged in some stuff that's probably really problematic. It's probably going to blow up in that judge's face. And it would have been really easy for that. If it wasn't Young Thug and it was just some random guy, I don't know that anyone would would notice. Like it might make a local paper's byline of like local lawyer spends 20 days in jail. So it is good that we have eyes on this and keep our eyes on it, but we have to be mindful of the harm we can cause and try to minimize that as much as possible, I guess is my take on it.
And I think that holds true for the mainstream media as well, not just YouTubers. I think they've gotten off the rails and the proverbial track a little bit. Dr. Vonda K, should I be uneasy? I have not gotten my signed book. Ian, I've written a book about my mother, who's a child Holocaust survivor, and don't be uneasy, Dr. Vonda. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see Carm, I think, right after this, if the roads will allow me, because there's flooding here. There's a few more we have to get out, and it will be in the mail shortly. We've been on the road, and so my apologies about that. Rob D'Amico from Girl Rye. The scary part of this is the shoddy investigation, and Karen Reed could be any of us. Someone without the money, and she comes from financial means, would already be convicted regardless of the facts. Do you agree with this, Rob? Is the justice system kind of jilted and tilted in favor of those who have more means here, like Karen Reed and her family?
I think the quick answer is yes. Like if I go on trial, I'll mortgage everything to get the best lawyer, because the best lawyers are the best lawyers for a reason. No one likes lawyers until you really need one. And I tell everyone I would never talk to the police without a lawyer, like almost no matter what. Like it's one of those things that it's just inherent. And coming from the other side, I would try to get people to talk, to give me information. And it's one of those things like the only person who looks out for yourself is yourself. And then you get a good lawyer that is just known to be that way, and they cost money, unfortunately. And you look at, I always still say, I would rather have a guilty person on the street than an innocent person in jail, because I cannot imagine sitting in jail having not done what I was convicted for. And I it's one of those things. The burden is on the prosecution, the police, to put a case on that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And I can only think, and again, there's tons of great cops out there and prosecutors and everything else, and justice is being served, but the small amount that aren't, I just can't fathom having been in that place. So it's almost like a nightmare to me to be accused of something I didn't do, and I react viscerally about it. It's one of those things that, yes, money buys really good lawyers, and unfortunately it's the case. And there's been probably plenty of people that have been innocent. And then also, like on the pleading, like I think if they had pled down this case, like I can't even imagine they're going for second-degree murder in this at all. But if they had given some, like maybe some much lower thing, vehicular, homicide or whatever with that, her lawyer might have said, well, I'll just plead to this because we don't want to go to trial, whatever. And was it over? I think was overcharged to begin with. But again, you just got to get your best lawyer and mortgage everything you can, because your freedom is more than, you worry about the other later. Getting that good lawyer is going to be what counts.
I have a feeling the COE would not let me mortgage my house to save myself, but we'll see. We'll see if that. Hopefully that day does not come. Rob D'Amico, Ragnar Rocker here. Key fact: it was a group text of 5 Massachusetts state police officers. Look at this, Becky Ireland talking about having your what together. Joel, I bought my tickets and booked my room for CrimeCon Denver yesterday. I can't wait to meet you and Carm in person. If the COE and I do this by this time next year, it'll be a miracle. But hopefully we're going to be invited back to content creator row there, and hopefully we will see you, Becky Ireland. There's only one woman on this panel, so I got to toss this to her. This was arguably the most difficult thing to listen to yesterday, and I just want to kind of not replay it literally, but just out loud here. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor confirmed yesterday that he called Karen Reed a whack job. See you next Tuesday. It rhymes with hunt. And again, that word retarded, as well as making light of Crohn's disease that she reportedly has, and MS in her text to friends. It doesn't really get lower than this, Brandy. And this jury makeup is, from what I understand, 10 women out of 12 jurors, 2 of them Asian Americans. How are they going to react to this?
I mean, mad. Because the thing is, I get that there are group texts or texts between us and our friends on everybody's phone that you would never want read out loud. And I'm sure that I've called somebody a whack job before. I know I have. I did earlier today. But regardless, I know that these things, happen. What is different about this one is the heaviness of it because of some of the not just the derogatory words and how derogatory they were, but the fact that he has her phone because he's in a position of power through the Massachusetts State Police, and he's talking to to some of his supervisors about this. This isn't just venting to your buddy that this whack job chick probably just killed your buddy. This is very different, and that is really hard for a jury. I think it would be really hard for a woman on a jury to hear. And then the stuff about the medical stuff, and I said this yesterday, that was one of the I got so angry watching this part. And I going through cancer, I had like 30 surgeries. I had to do a lot of reconstruction stuff. I was in the hospital for, I don't even know how, I mean, it was crazy. And I have lifelong health problems that I will always have because of that. And I have like scars everywhere. I always joke about being a science project, but having something that is having a medical thing that is just made light of and joked about and making fun of her about it. If you love her or hate her or don't care either way, just hearing that is, I think, just so slimy. It just felt slimy. And it just calls into question the character of the person saying these things. And that's where the problem's going to be. Him saying those things doesn't mean that he's out there sprinkling taillight. What it means is that he has lost trust in the eyes of me as a juror, because now I don't trust slimy. That's not who I roll with. So I would start questioning everything.
I'm with you on that. And obviously, the hearts go out to you. And I know you're on the mend here, Brandy, so we're wishing you only good health. Go ahead, Rob.
I had visceral reactions to the medical stuff. I got stuff. I'm around cops and everything else. Unfortunately, retarded, like coming from the Northeast at the time frame, and where this cop is from in Massachusetts, it's horrible. But I get it. The see you next Tuesday. Not going to say I haven't used that again. Like it's one of those. But to make fun of her medical condition was like, I literally like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, really? That's how low you're going to go? Like, come on, stop it. Like that you talked about, that was the one where I'm like, for her, it like she's sitting on trial now. The entire country knows her issues that way, and it's just like, wow.
A lot of lines were crossed, but that one is particularly disgusting. Armand Fence here to Ian Runkle. Why do you think the judge did not put on record why the Commonwealth introduced the mirror video into evidence instead of the real one? Do you have a legal answer for that? By the way, Nikki Cuds, friend of the show, I completely switched my tune. They are hiding something. So it's important to note she's a woman, Runkle. She just switched her tune. But what about the on the record about the video, the inverted video?
I think that's really more of the lawyer's job, right? The judge can't step into the fray there. And so I think what you get is that it was Lally's job to fix that. And that was such an own goal, because Lally should have called that right away. He's presenting the video, and I would like, if I'm in his shoes, when I've got, the trooper on the stand there, I say, hey, do you notice anything about that car? And he says, yeah. It's like, does it have some words printed on it? Yeah. Can you tell me about those? Well, they're mirrored. Oh, why is that? Well, because this video is mirrored. Why is the video mirrored? I don't know. It's just how it's set up. Okay. And I would have shown them, here's like the video we pulled off the machine. We're showing this to you because it's the video we pulled off the machine and we don't want to hide anything.
Mhm.
But also, we have flipped it back. So this is actually how you'd have seen it if you're from that perspective, because they cannot afford at all to be looking like they're hiding something when the defense's opening was Karen Reed was framed and laying out this, like, how you possibly get to leaving this for the defense to work with when they could absolutely have countered that ahead of time is just mind-boggling. And it's I hope that the reason is that Lolly didn't realize it until after it was too late. That, I think, is the better explanation, even though that's an explanation of incompetence. Because the other explanation is he hoped nobody would catch him, and that explanation is ugly because and that's where the jury might be thinking. And if the jury is thinking that, then Lolly himself has now lost credibility, which means they won't listen to him. Anything you, as the lawyer, you can't, lose that credibility. And especially the prosecution basically gets that for free. Defense counsel usually has to build that out of nothing because they're suspicious of defense counsel. But the prosecution generally gets that as sort of the home field advantage. I don't have an explanation that is good. I just have different degrees of bad and a whole lot of like, what the F?
Yeah. Ned Smith here. I wore my STS shirt to get my car inspected today. You probably failed. Rob D'Amico, you were shaking your head. By the way, if I don't hit your super chat, it's because I have no idea how to do any of the tech stuff. I just sit here. I'm just a dumb talking head, and the COE is not here, so I apologize. But keep them coming, and hopefully I'll get to them. Rob D'Amico, you think that was an innocent mistake by the Commonwealth, or something more sinister that they purposely inverted that video?
I don't think it was sinister. That would have to be like that these people like, oh, we'll just like slip this in and they're not going to notice. Like, but again, it just shows incompetence. Like, why you wouldn't have a mirror image, each video running, showing that, yes, this is the one we pulled off the tape because it is truly, certified what we got from the video, but it's really kind of confusing because it is mirrored. So we flipped it, but you can watch them both side by side. So you're not seeing there's anything. But then again, your Sally Port has motion detection and that's it. I like, what's with that? Like, you have evidence in there and you're only going to put motion detection so you could cut out frames and it not being noticed. Now, this is funny because I was dealing with some SEALs that they're not investigators. And we did it was a hostage rescue where we couldn't have any FBI on target. And I said, hey, I'm going to need the pictures from the camera when you guys get back, because if we go to trial for someone else, it's got to go to court. So we got to have pictures. And he comes back and I look and I'm counting the numbers, and sure enough, one's deleted. And I said, dude, what'd you do? And he goes, oh, I accidentally took a picture of my shoe, so I deleted it. I'm like, I said, I don't care if it's a picture of your junk. Leave it in there. I can explain that. If there's a deleted photo, defense goes, oh, this is where my client was innocent and you deleted the photo. And it's like that basic, like you have time, you have motion on evidence, motion detection, so that if there's something cut out, you can't tell. That is just beyond understanding that, like, the video is almost like useless now because defense can say, where he broke the taillight was right here, the video that cuts out. They say it's motion, but then again, Canton police had it, so who knows what happened to it. But again, just having the video, as he said, was side by side. This is what we got. This is so that you can understand it better because it's unmirrored. And you can look at it, it's frame for frame.
Well said. And anytime I talk to guys like Rob, former law enforcement, they always say that, the investigation is just part of it, but you got to take it to trial, and everything that you do in that investigation is critical for when you get to trial. So the more seasoned investigators think the way Rob does. Go ahead, Ian. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I see people in the chat saying I have motion detection, but the thing is your home security system, you're looking for different things. Like you might have motion detection for your camera in your back lane because you only really care about if it shows something. But police, for that Sally port, they're actually usually trying to prove a negative as opposed to a positive. They're not trying to capture the moment when somebody's breaking into a police car, because that's not going to happen. What they're trying to do is they're trying to establish that, like, if this guy has a great big bruise on his face, that it's because he tripped or because he tried to rush a cop or something like that. And you don't know when that moment is going to be. You can't have it on motion detection. And if the guy says, like, the officer just, cuffed me upside the head, you absolutely need that entire video so you can show every second and say that never happened. The configuration of motion set, like, it's fine for, like, I'm using this to make sure no one's stealing my mail or my Amazon package or whatever. It is absolutely not fine for the police context. And whoever set that up needs to be chewed out with, like, hey, you just blew an investigation. Good job. Go unscrew all of our equipment, please.
Yeah.
Jen and Ken here, gifting 10 Surviving the Survivor memberships, followed by Luna's mom. I think the text proved that he decided, Michael Proctor, on day one, before much investigation, that Karen was guilty and was in pursuit of evidence to prove himself right. And that's sort of how Alan Jackson finished off yesterday before Judge Beverly Cannoni adjourned for the day. And you can bet that's where they're going to pick it up right at that point. There was a comment that I jumped off of, Brandy, asking essentially, why would Michael Proctor have this level of kind of animus towards Karen Reed so quickly? He didn't really know her. And it's Chloe's mom who made the comment. And she is saying that it's because Jen McCabe was lying to Michael Proctor. And that's why suddenly he became this angry, state trooper saying these god awful things. Do you agree with that? Do you think Jen McCabe potentially influenced him? Why would he be so bitter towards her without really knowing who she is?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I can speculate that it would be because of, and it also, I think a lot of what you think about why he feels that way depends on what you believe happened, because a lot of people can speculate, oh, well, he feels that way because he, knows that it ran over his brother in blue. Or you could say that, I think that he feels that way because, Jen McCabe is a dirty liar. So it kind of depends on what you believe is the most logical or the most likely scenario of what happened. But it does seem like it could potentially be a little bit of both. I mean, if he's hearing from, these people who, even if he doesn't have a close personal relationship with them, he knows that his sister does. So that can automatically have you put a little bit more, or have him put a little bit more trust into them maybe, and take, some of what they're saying, even if it's hyperbole or if it's, gossip or if it's whatever, maybe take it a little bit more seriously. We've heard that Karen was kind of an outsider with the group, and hearing them testify, I mean, we hear, the way that that they not only talk about her, but about, mentioning John O'Keefe, even saying, like, the guy never went in the house. And, when Jen McCabe said she went and told Brian and Nicole Albert that John was dead, Brian Albert said, John who? So this is not, Karen is not one of their, besties where they've grown up braiding each other's hair on Saturday nights. This is, an outsider for their group. So if he thinks that that's what happened, and that's, he's hearing these things from them, I guess that would be, the only explanation I could think of why he would feel so angry immediately.
I think I'd have to agree with you, because what else would the impetus be there? Rob D'Amico, this is a $64,000 question. I never understood why nobody took pictures of the taillight on the 29th. I mean, case over if they did. What happened there?
I can't get into how poorly the investigation was. The fact that they closed the crime scene, 3 hours after they started it, and then then the trooper's instructions like, hey, why don't you guys, like, every time you drive by, come back again and see if you can find something else. Like, I don't even know how you introduce evidence at all that was found after that. But then if you want to look at the other weirdness, okay, so the guy who initially searches finds all this little stuff. And then the guy who searches days later finds huge things. Like, well, how, like, if the first guy looked enough to find these little bits of plastic, how did he miss, like, you know, this bigger one that was somehow found 5 days later? And why Canton police, after they recused themselves, why the chief happened to be there and say, oh, he found something, and then the one trooper, it is so, I have 10 pages of notes of just, I can't believe what I'm hearing on an investigation. I literally can take someone who's watched 5 seasons of CSI and they're going to do a better job. Like, and I hate to go back, and I hate to badmouth, like, you know, my brethren, but really drive by like every day and see if you guys find something. Like, what in the world? Like, we would have heating lamps out there melting snow. You don't close the crime scene until it's done, and it's a fellow cop. Okay, like if you're looking at it, this is a fellow cop that you know, that the fireman gave 10% chance of living, which I've never heard a fireman, like EMT guy, give those, you know, percentage. Again, there's so many oddities in this in general. But
Rob, speaking of that here from Katie, she says, I really wonder if they would have even brought this case if John O'Keefe was a civilian. What do you think?
I think they might have been a lot more inclined to drop it.
Question. I like, wow. I'd have to think on that one. I don't think it was double, you know, secondary murder.
Yeah.
But I mean, looking at that from the opposite side too, you think that with him being a cop, that they would have put so much more effort into the investigation, and they didn't. So
exactly.
Yeah. That's a great point too. Go ahead, Ian.
Normally, a murder opens up all the funding doors, but like the murder of a police officer, if they'd asked, they probably could have said, listen, we suspect that a fellow officer was murdered. And they could have had officers from like 5 or 6 detachments around coming through. They probably could have had people going through that with teaspoons. They could have had the manpower to go through every piece of snow with a teaspoon and melt it in their hands to see if they find anything. Like, this whole notion that this, like, I could see an officer using a solo cup I can imagine the circumstances. Like, let's say you drive out, there's blood on the snow somewhere. It is now turning into pouring rain. That blood is going to be gone in the next 2 minutes. And you're like, I got to get a sample of this. I got something. It's better than nothing. But they had all the time in the world. What's going to preserve the blood? Frozen. Like, it's literally freezing out. This is, you know, you put up the perimeter. You put up tents to keep further snow from coming down. You set up the heaters. And you go down to bare dirt. And I would have been like, it's a police officer. You could have had people going through with rakes afterwards going, we're going to find every single anything. If there's a cigarette butt, we're going to find it. Because you know how many cases have been blown open by a cigarette butt? Like, but here they were just like, who cares? And it's so...
Yeah.
It's just hard to imagine, because I have seen... I've seen break and enters investigated better. I have seen better investigation for literally somebody stole somebody's pop cans out of their backyard. And I saw a better investigation conducted over that.
By the way, is Ian, I got to ask the most important question here. Is pop the universally used Canadian term for soda, or is it like here where in the East they say soda?
It's East-West. You get some differentiation. We also get sort of different uses of language on like the sort of East, where you've got the islands out east. So
For full disclosure, I'm a Coca-Cola addict. I can't wean myself off of it, but I'm trying. Rob D'Amico, I want to ask, I see you getting ready there, Rob, but this is an interesting comment. On the flip side, the Commonwealth, and obviously the burden is on the Commonwealth here, but Jerry Michael says no conspiracy has been proved. Now, this next tweet that I'm about to read, please send your hate mail to the Prosecutors podcast. It's from them. One went to Harvard, Brett and Alice. One went to Yale. I think it was Brett that went to Harvard. Alice went to Yale. Obviously, very intelligent, and they won Podcast of the Year last year at CrimeCon. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that this is Brett who tweeted this. Rob, I'm gonna read you this tweet. Trooper Proctor texted like he thought his texts were encrypted by the NSA and would never see the light of day, and yet somehow managed to neglect to mention the massive cover-up he's supposedly involved in. Weird. So he's obviously, I know Brett is sarcastic, but he's saying here, he was talking about everything. Why would he not have talked about the cover-up? It's clear that Brett thinks, he's saying it sarcastically, that he doesn't think he's part of a cover-up. Is there any veracity to this? The fact that he's talking about everything else, and if he's talking to his cop buddies, would he have been so dumb as to say, hey, what about the cover-up? What do you think?
Yeah. So I guess he'd say, hey, cover-up text number 1. She's, R word, see you next Tuesday. Cover-up text number 2. Like, come on, stop. And if he's using text, anybody can get text. Now, if he's using Threema, he's got some NSA friends, because if you don't know what a secure text is, get Threema. There's only been one movie that's talked about that. Otherwise, most use Signal, which is great point-to-point encryption, but you can still get it if you take the phone, unless you don't have. There's other ways, but he's texting. Like, again, that in general, like my the 5th grade kid down the road can get your texts, but. Do you really want him to start talking about like the conspiracy, the cover-up on a text? No, and I'm not saying that the fact that he said what he said meant he was like in throes of the cover-up. I talk about judgment and his unprofessionalism and other things that are going to his credibility. That's going to throw this case where I think it's going to go. I said his text to me didn't mean exactly that he's part of a quote cover-up. It's how bad the investigation's run, how poor his judgment is. When he got into making fun of her medical issues, that's just bully. Like, come on. So I don't think it's the same. But to say like, oh, like he would have been mentioning a conspiracy if he was texting, right? Like that's stop.
Yeah. Well, he'd have to be the biggest idiot on the planet to be doing that. But Ian, this is where we kind of left off yesterday. This is Alan Jackson on cross of Trooper Michael Proctor, and he says to Michael Proctor, he says, in other words, Trooper Proctor, you don't get to pick a suspect and then try to find evidence to support your choice, right? He asks. Correct, Proctor replies. But in this case, that's exactly what you did, isn't it? He says, absolutely not. He's going to make the case starting tomorrow morning that he basically created this evidence to fit his narrative. And what is Michael Proctor? Is he just going to continue to say that's not the case? I mean, where is this going to lead? And does it really have to lead anywhere other than continuing to raise this reasonable doubt amongst the jurors?
I mean, at the end of the day, everyone always talks about like what the defense has to prove, but it's always up to the state, to the government, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every element of things. And so if the jury walks away from this going, I don't know what happened, then they have to acquit. But it goes further than that. If the jury walks away and they say, I'm 75% sure she did it, 80%, they've got to acquit. It's, if there's that lingering, well, maybe. And so I see people saying things like, oh, well, it's, I have a theory for how it's possible. And I go, no, they don't need to establish a conspiracy. They don't need to establish any of this. They just need the jury to be going, I got questions. And if the jury's sitting there going, I got questions, that's it. That's all they got to do. So,
yeah. And you know what? I think everyone's got questions on every side of this. Brandy, I asked this question last night, which I'll ask of you. I mean, this is just like a tornado of, just disastrous investigative work that is so spun up right now. I would have a hard time. I mean, this is me speaking now. If I was a juror, I would have a hard time keeping my eye on the evidence. I would be so swept up by all the ancillary things going on, the corruption, the language of this. How likely is it at this point that the jurors themselves are just watching this ridiculous soap opera play out and are not necessarily following the evidence that they're instructed to follow?
I mean, I think that that has so many different factors that play into it. And I think that it's really one of those things that's so interesting, especially because of the difference of styles between Lally and both defense attorneys. When I'm, I stream the case during the day, or I stream the trial during the day, and then I'm going back over everything at night and, making my notes, downloading the transcripts, making my notes for the podcast episodes. And I catch so many things, especially from the Commonwealth when I'm going back over it, that I missed during the day, because the kind of the dial tone, like the monotone, Lally and all of his questions are so tedious. And, there are things that he has brought in that are bad against, the defense, but he doesn't emphasize those. And I think that so many of the things do get lost because of his style. And then when you have somebody like, Jackson, who gets up there and he emphasizes, and when he wants you to pay attention to something, he makes sure you can hear an inflection in his voice, and you can hear, a little bit of the drama. And he's very much, he's a great attorney. He's a showman when it comes to those kind of things, but it keeps the jury engaged. And I think that a lot of the evidence is getting missed. A lot of the evidence that they brought in has been getting missed, because even me, when I'm sitting there focused trying to watch it all day, I've missed stuff and don't, see it until I go back at night. But they don't get to go back at night and watch it on YouTube and download the transcripts and revisit everything. So I think that there are a lot of things that are going to be missed. I think the closing arguments are going to be a big deal. But if the closing arguments are anything like the opening statements, that's it. Bless his heart. Lally just needs a little bit of, he needs a speechwriter, I think, for his closing arguments. But
I think he needs an acting coach is what he really needs. Maybe a speechwriter too, but he needs someone said he just has no inflection, so the jurors can't follow what he's saying, which I tend to sort of agree with. This is a legal question here from Lindsay Hendricks, so it goes to the only lawyer. Here we go, Ian. What do you make of Lally framing that second arrest body cam audio as quote unquote interview audio between Karen Reed and Yuri Buchanan?
I thought that was odd, because it is properly it's a body cam recording. You should tell the jury what that is, especially when your credibility is so badly on the line here. Just tell them what it is. Tell them what you have and what you don't have. And it's not an interview. It's not, I guess he's trying to make it sound like it's more than sort of an off the cuff statement, because really what it breaks down to is it sounds kind of like this sarcastic, sort of, I guess, somewhat bitter statement saying like, oh yeah, we know what's happened here. The other thing is that statement, that initial part of the audio is very hard to make out. It's hard to hear. But when you listen to that initial part of the audio, it comes off very differently than it does if you don't hear that. So I'm wondering if he's hoping that the jury just never actually figures out what that first part was said. And I don't like it when the prosecution is when it feels like they're trying to shape facts. Because the best prosecutions, and this is the usual prosecutions, are just ones where the prosecutor comes in and is like, jury, you're going to do what you're going to do. Here's all the evidence. We think it's murder. What do you think? Right. And they're just presenting the good with the bad and not massaging. And
Mhm.
it felt like a little bit of massaging, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. Couple of comments here. Do you notice how Lally tries to say there was snow caked on the taillight? That's why you couldn't see the taillight all cracked. Sorry for the typo. And then this is about the other officer that took the stand yesterday, who was a Dighton police officer. Why only the outsider cop says the taillight was just cracked? Rob D'Amico, I've got something here that I want to read to you. This is about Michael Proctor on the missing shoe. And after this, maybe a question or two more, and then we will start to wrap it up. This is Michael Proctor speaking yesterday, Rob, about the missing shoe. He says both eyes were swollen and black and blue. He had a cut on, I believe it was his right nostril. Another smaller cut, I think it was on his left eye. Those were the injuries that kind of jumped out to me. He also said he noticed blood on the back of John O'Keefe's head. As the troopers collected John O'Keefe's clothing from the hospital room, he says one thing that had jumped out to both of us was one sneaker, Proctor recalled. Prosecutor Adam Lally asked Proctor about his prior experience investigating crashes involving motor vehicles and pedestrians. And Michael Proctor says, in those experiences, I've observed one, if not both pieces of footwear remained at the point of impact, Proctor explained. O'Keefe's missing shoe revealed, quote unquote, the potential of a vehicle strike. What about that one missing shoe? Is that a good piece of evidence for the Commonwealth? Is he making a good point here? We had you on, I think the very first time you were on, you said you've seen cars go in reverse at upwards of 25 miles an hour that wouldn't necessarily kill a person.
Yeah, there's two things. One, we'll go on the shoe thing first. There's a little bit of yes and no to that. And I don't. Shoes do come off on impact with vehicles. I don't know if they stay in place though. If that's the thing, and you can, God, there's so many Instagram and videos now of people having horrible accidents with cars, and shoes go flying. I don't know about point of impact, but shoes come off a lot in an impact. At 24 miles an hour though, like we talked about it. I don't see all that, like the damage on him. I don't see from a car going back 24 miles an hour, and to back up 24 miles an hour in a snowstorm isn't the easiest thing. Go in a parking lot and go in reverse at 24 miles an hour and see how fast that feels. And if you can get in that and hit somebody in a snowstorm at that, and I don't see the damage from what I'm seeing with what's been presented on someone backing into someone at 24 miles an hour. And I don't know, like, it's again, the shoes can come off during a vehicle to pedestrian accident. And I think you see it, the faster it goes, I think the more the shoes go flying type of thing, depending on the body. So I think there's some of that, yeah, you've probably seen pedestrians hit by vehicles and the shoes come off. But I don't know the other thing about when you looked at him saying, hey, that's from a vehicle. Like I think the first officer that saw him everyone thought it was an altercation based on what they're seeing type of thing. I backing up 24 miles an hour in the snow, unless he was pinned against something, that I can see. If he was, like, if it was a tree behind him or a building behind him, hitting him at 24 miles an hour, I could see doing internal damage enough to kill him, the point where he's then laying, in snow. I don't see it the way they're describing it at all.
Cakespoo adding that he's also said that EMS cut it off. So which is it? Justice for all. Please have Brandy give her thoughts. This will be the final question. Then we'll get some final thoughts and call it a show. But please have Brandy give her thoughts on the I think it was 227 Google search. She has receipts. Your take on this, Brandy? I'd be lying if I said I fully understood this, because some of what I understand is that Safari on the phone was opened at that time, but maybe a different search was conducted later. What can you tell us about this?
So I asked, because I'm not a tech person, so I'm one that has to call my kid to come over and fix my internets every time it's, something happens. So I asked a programmer. I talked to actually a programmer, a coder who had worked for Apple, and somebody from Celebrite. And I had a spreadsheet where I put together all of their information and tried to dumb it down as much as possible. And none of them had anything to do with the case. They don't have anything. So I was just telling them, like, tell me what you can tell me. And without the forensic image of the phone, they can only tell me about how the coding works. So that's what they explained to me. And the way that it was broken down to me is that the way that, Celebrite is always, it's kind of like a cat and mouse with Apple. So Apple is always trying to protect your privacy. Celebrite's always trying to get it. But the thing is, the Celebrite, they can, they're coming up with all this new software, like, to get all the information off your phone. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are able to interpret how it was written onto the phone, where it was stored, why it was stored there, that type of thing. The way that I understand it is, the way that it was explained to me by the coder is that it could not have happened that far. It would not say 227 if it happened that far in the future, because the checkpoints where it writes from the WAL file onto the database, it won't let it go that far, even if you wait that long to close another tab, because the checkpoints are set up to be at a when the WAL file reaches a certain size, or if there's a trigger action, which would be like closing the tab, or every 5 minutes, if nothing has triggered it, it will have one automatically. So that's why he explained to me that it would not be able to do that. And then the other thing was when she said on the stand that she was Googling it at 6:23 and 6:24. She said that she was Googling it and then she stopped Googling because they were moving John, but John had already been in the ambulance for 10 minutes by that time. So that part didn't. And the only reason I went back because of that time frame, I went back and looked at the dash cam to double check, and then pulled, the reports from the EMT and all that. So by the time she said, I stopped Googling it and didn't look at the results because they were moving John had already been in the ambulance for 10 minutes. So I don't know what the reasons would be. I don't know. I'm not coming up with my own explanations, but that's what was explained to me. And that's what I've still got questions on.
And that's what we should have John Sawicki, if he's still watching, we'll get him on. He can also talk the law in the case because he is an attorney and a former law enforcement officer. Virginia Little, Rob D'Amico, you are the best rep for a retired officer that I've seen through this whole thing. Kudos to you. If you didn't know him before, you know him now. He's Robert D'Amico. He is the founder of Sierra One Consulting. He had a really esteemed 39-year career as both an FBI agent, and he was also in the military, and he was chasing Somali pirates across Africa, which is something I will never be able to say. Rob, what about the black box for the Lexus? That's something everyone's been asking about, and your final thoughts here.
I don't know. I don't know enough about specifics of the black box of a vehicle and what they're going to be able to pinpoint type of thing. I do know, like, when you start looking at some of that data that you have to really then get technical and stuff, you can pull things out. But I don't know if it's going to prove a case beyond how bad. Again, the investigation has so many holes. It's so bad that in order to patch that up, you're going to have to. I think you'd have to have video from the neighbor's ring cam of her hitting him to overcome what's been put out there with some of it. And I'm not saying it like the ninth inning's not going to come. They may have Aaron Judge. I know all you Boston Red Sox fans are going to crush me on that one, but they may have him or Soto to hit that grand slam. I don't see it. To overcome what's out there of this is going to be monumental, I think. Otherwise, and like you said, though, 80%, if you only think 80% of it is that she did it, you still have to, that's where the jury instructions are going to be. You have to acquit at that point. I don't know how they're going to get over the mound that they have in front of them.
By the way, I never say this. I don't know why, but please hit the subscribe button if you like the show. Also hit the like button. I think I'm supposed to be saying that every show, but I never do. Most importantly, my beloved mom, who is my co-host of this show, is turning 85. I've just written a book about her. Child Holocaust survivor. She has a very grande boca, which means big mouth in a good way. Very opinionated, and it's a really fascinating story she has If you're interested, it is available on the Amazon and anywhere books are sold right now. And guess what? You don't have to remember the title. It's the same as this podcast, Surviving the Survivor. From Papillon74, it feels like Lally didn't want to try this case because it was so badly handled, but was forced to. And Rob, you deserve more love. Great panel. Joel, it is Ida, JD. All of a sudden, the love is coming Rob D'Amico's way. It always comes Brandy Churchwell's way. She is the creator and host of 13th Juror live stream and podcast. I love that name, by the way. Her second season of the podcast, Conspiracy in Canton, takes a deep dive into this case against Karen Reed. It's one of the top podcasts, true crime podcasts in the country. Check it out. She's worked hard on it. Obviously, we're going to see more Michael Proctor tomorrow, Brandy. What are you expecting in the coming days?
I feel like there's going to be a lot of all of the questions that we have about everything. I think that the defense pays attention to, the questions that the public has, and because that's a hint of what your jury is looking for too. So I think we're going to have a lot of, hitting on some of that and hopefully getting at least some kind of explanation for some of the questions that we have. But I feel like it's going to get pretty intense.
Look at this. Come on, SGS, come off the fence. I've said it many times. I'll say it again to J-Pop quadruple zero. When I started, I thought this conspiracy thing was insane. I really did. And I thought she committed this crime. I'm not saying she did not commit this crime, but what I'm saying now is that these police officers, I'm talking about the Alberts, the Higgins, Proctors, they're covering something up, but we don't know. No one knows what it is. You might think you know what it is, but unless you were in that house that night, you don't know for 1,000% sure. Is there the possibility that Karen Reed did in fact strike and hit Officer John O'Keefe? I think there is still that possibility. So I don't know that I'm not getting off the fence here, but I'm saying something stinks in Canton, and I don't know the answer. I wish I had the answer. I wish I could hand justice over to the O'Keefe family on a silver platter, but we talked about this at the beginning, and I don't think any of us, unfortunately, are going to be able to do that. The one man who could do it on the silver platter is the man with the silver gray hair. You thought that Anderson Cooper was the silver fox, but think again. It is Ian Runkle. Screw Anderson Cooper. It is now Ian Runkle. He hosts a legal information and education YouTube channel called Runkle of the Bailey. He's also a firearms law expert. How many people can say that? He is a Canadian. We love Canadians, but he covers cases here in America. Ian, I'm so happy we got to meet and had you on the show. Proctor's going to be back on the stand tomorrow. Are you expecting the cliche fireworks to erupt when Jackson crosses in tomorrow?
I mean, Jackson didn't really have enough time to wind up on him. We're going to see. Really all he's got to do is just drag him through the mud that we've already seen. Yeah. And it's going to be fun. This is the kind of cross-examination that it's really hard to screw up because Proctor starts off looking so awful, and this is the kind of cross-examination as a lawyer you just hope for. I bet that they argued over which one would get to do it because Jackson's just going to have fun with him, and we're gonna get to see a cat sort of playing with its kill, and I do not envy Proctor. I don't know why this trial is going forward if he's the lead investigator. So it's going to be exciting.
I just hope he doesn't look arrogant putting him down, though. He's got to do it to the point where he doesn't look arrogant to the jury doing it. But I think he's going to have fun. And from everything I've seen before, he's going to do it right.
Yeah. And Ian, a final question for you. I lied. Our guests last night were saying, and this is Mark Betterow, who's very kind of pro Karen Reed's defense team. He said if the Commonwealth had any integrity at this point, they would dismiss the case. Any chance in hell of that happening tomorrow?
I think they've overcommitted. I think that they are unlikely to dismiss it just because they would eat a media firestorm. The fact that the U.S. has elected prosecutors is also a problem because it's a lot easier to justify, I ran the trial and I did my best and the jury did what they did versus I killed this. I think we're going to see them run it to the ground. I would have killed this even before Proctor. Like, and they have Proctor's texts. I would have killed this already. The fact that they haven't yet, the fact that they were they went through Proctor's texts. This is going to the end. We're going to get a verdict on this one, or we're, unless the judge tosses it, but it's going to go to a jury verdict.
You heard it. You heard it here from the new Silver Fox. The old one takes that. And I have a beef with Anderson Cooper. If you listen to him consistently and watch him, he takes 19 news cycles to spit out the question, Anderson. That's my beef with Anderson Cooper. On that note, look at this. Papillon, Silver Fox, Ian, Brandy's Conspiracy and Canton podcast is awesome. By the way, tomorrow morning, I'll be here 9 a.m. and Steve Cohen, as we speak, is working to get us a legal expert to watch the trial with us tomorrow, but I will be here. Yes, I am Ian, rolling right past Anderson Cooper. Love you, America. Of course, we love you, Canada. We love you, Florida, New Jersey, Florida, again with Randy, and Edmonton. But don't go too far, Edmonton, because we want the Florida Panthers to win the Stanley Cup. That's where we are from, Rob and I, until tomorrow morning. See you then. By the way, Brandy and Ian, are you coming back on my show ever again, or was this it?
Yeah, no, I'm down.
Absolutely.
I love getting hate mail.
I love it. All right. Awesome. Stick around, guests.